Welcome to the Man of Recaps. This is the original 3 seasons of
It's Arrested Development.
Michael Bluth is the manager of the family business, the Bluth Housing Company. His dad, George Sr., is retiring and finally going to name him president. He lives with his son, George Michael, in the latest Bluth family development, the one model home they've built so far. His sister, Lindsay Bluth, considers herself an activist, but really she's just a spoiled Newport Beach socialite. She married psychiatrist Dr. Tobias Funke, but unfortunately he's recently lost his medical license. Over at the Bluth frozen banana stand, George Michael meets their daughter, his cousin, Maybe. She tries to make her parents mad by kissing her cousin, which starts a series-long cousin crush for George Michael. Michael's brother, Job Bluth, is a magician. He's planned a trick for the party.
Illusion, Michael. Trick is something a whore does for money.
And their younger brother, Buster, is a real man baby. He's a mama's boy, still lives at home with her. Their mother, Lucille, is a mean old girl. She loves her furs and has a martini for breakfast every morning. And when George Sr. retires, he names his wife as the new president, not Michael. Turns out that's for the best because the cops show up. George Sr. has definitely been embezzling from the company for years. Job tries to hide his father in the Aztec tomb. Unfortunately, the news crews reveal how the trick works, which gets him kicked out of the Magician's Alliance. Tobias missed the party. He followed these pirates onto the wrong boat and accidentally joined a gay protest. There he discovered something new about himself. Not that he's very obviously gay, but that he wants to be an actor. Michael's ready to leave his family behind, but with their funds cut off, they have nowhere else to turn. So they all stay in the model home, and Michael agrees to keep his family together. Michael tries to get his father out of prison, but George doesn't want to go.
You're doing time.
I'm doing the time of my life.
He asks his mother where the evidence is, but she's not talking, so he fakes a call that the IRS is repossessing her furs, so she sends her housekeeper to hide them in the secret storage unit, which has already been burnt down. It was definitely the work of an arsonist, which is what George Sr. meant when he called his newly released roommate a flamer. Michael's struggling to keep the company afloat. They need more money.
Always money in the banana stand.
The cousins are working the banana stand, and all the close proximity is just fueling George Michael's cousin crush. Maybe is not very good at accounting, and when George Michael realizes he's been losing money, he takes a page out of his grandfather's book and tries to burn it down. Michael supports this, actually. He thinks it'll teach his father a lesson, plus he just had Job mail the insurance check. But George Sr. clarifies his earlier statement. The walls of the banana stand were lined with cash. Tobias pursues his dream of becoming an actor, but he accentuates the fire aspect of the fire sale. Lindsay, on the other hand, has a perfect delivery, so she gets the job instead. Unfortunately, she celebrates prematurely and misses it. Michael makes cornballs with his father's invention, the cornballer. It's no longer sold in the United States because it causes horrible burns. George Michael's auditioning for the school play so he can have the kiss scene with his cousin Maybe, but she's only going out for it so she can have a kiss scene with Steve Holt. Steve Holt! Since being kicked out of the Magician's Alliance, Job's magic career has been in the dumps.
I don't know what I expected.
He announces a grand illusion to break out of the prison where his father's being held. The secret to this trick is to swallow a key ahead of time, but he's poop shy. He can't pass it in the open here, so he realizes
I've made a huge mistake.
He does get some quality time with his dad, though. They play catch for the first time ever, and it goes about as poorly as any game of catch can. Still, he's moved out of prison to the hospital, so ta-da! Job's girlfriend Marta is a Spanish soap opera star. While he's in prison, he has Michael escort her to the Spanish Soap Opera Awards, where they actually hit it off. Lucille and Buster are there as well, and we meet Lucille's best frenemy, Lucille Austero, known as Lucille 2, and Buster, not wearing his glasses, accidentally flirts with her. Now, the Bluth company lost its private jet, but they did get to keep the stair car.
Watch out for bridges and hop-ons. You're gonna get some hop-ons.
The Bluth kids also fight over the use of their dad's car, which they treat very poorly. One day, Michael tries to be nice and give his mother's housekeeper a ride home, but turns out this is a random woman that just kind of looks like her, and when she sees what looks like bloodstains and a human skull from Buster's archaeological dig, she thinks she's gonna be murdered and runs off into the wetlands. Michael went there to pick up his sister, who's in the date auction for the wetlands. She went out to prove that she's a real activist, but learned she hates the wetlands. Buster is supposed to bid on his mother, like every year, but this time he's running late and bids on the wrong Lucille. He decides to roll with it, and these two are dating on and off throughout the series. George Sr. is eventually starting to dislike prison.
Daddy horny, Michael.
Michael convinces his mother to come for a conjugal visit, but his father's got Kitty in the next trailer that's his longtime secretary and longtime mistress. They send Job to go distract her, but he has a hard time finding her best side. He decides to escape, but the guards grab him and pin him against the trailer where his parents are getting it on. Now meet the family lawyer, Barry Zuckercorn.
Barry's very good.
He isn't. He does manage to get George Sr. out of prison for one day, the day of the Living Classics pageant the family always takes part in. This year, George Michael's gonna play Adam, but when Maeby sees him in the muscle suit and compliments him, he decides never to take it off again. Tobias understands. He also has something he can never take off. That's right, Tobias is a never nude, which is exactly what it sounds like. George Michael gets cold feet about appearing nude himself, so he takes a page out of his uncle's book.
There are dozens of us. Dozens!
And George Sr. makes his first of many escape attempts, none of which succeed. Marta comes by looking for Job, who is living on the family yacht and definitely cheating on her. A scary gangster is also looking for Job and threatens to break his legs. It turns out it's a non-scary magician who's threatening to steal Job's legs from his Saw the Woman in Half act, the legs, in fact, that Job is sleeping with. Michael hatches a plan to break up Marta and Job by having her come as a surprise assistant so she and the legs will both realize Job's cheating on them. So the night of Job's big show, Michael's plan fails because the legs already quit. Luckily, George Michael has soft womanly legs, so they get him as a last-minute replacement. Tobias missed this family event as well. He went to the wrong Gothic castle. Now, Lucille, too, suffers from vertigo, and that's putting a damper on her and Buster's relationship. He knows that marijuana can be good for vertigo, so he goes to see George Michael at the banana stand, which was always a haven of pot smokers.
It had even inspired a song.
Big yellow joint.
George Michael, of course, doesn't have any pot, so he leaves a note for his Uncle Job, who definitely does. But Michael wants to teach his son a lesson that drugs are bad, just like their father used to teach them lessons. Using his one-armed friend, he would stage elaborate scenarios to scare the kids into learning their lesson.
That's why you always leave a note.
Michael asks his father for that guy's contact info, but George Sr.'s recently had a religious experience and doesn't support that kind of deception. So the brothers decide to do it themselves. When George Michael comes, some unusually hot drug dealers show up, and then some unusually hot cops show up. They're from the hot cops stripping agency that Job sometimes works for. So it's a moderately successful lesson teaching, but then some real drug dealers show up, and some real cops show up. It turns into a shootout. Oh, and this one guy's arm gets blown clean off. Yeah, that's why you don't teach your sons lessons. Last lesson, I swear. Now Michael's trying to get his son into the prestigious Milford Academy, where children are neither to be seen nor heard. Buster was very good at this one, but they don't want him because the Bluth family is getting so much bad press. Luckily, Michael's just met a hot girl who turns out to be a PR specialist and will help the family. First, they give Tobias money for a plane ticket back to Boston so he can get his medical license back, but on the way, he meets actor Carl Weathers, who conveniently charges for acting lessons exactly the cost of that ticket. Tobias's acting doesn't improve, but he does learn some valuable life lessons.
You take this home, throw it in a pot, add some broth, a potato. Baby, you got a stew going.
Michael almost starts dating the PR girl, but his wife died years ago from cancer, and he still doesn't feel comfortable dating with his son. So he lets her down easy, but she doesn't like being told no and puts a bunch of bad press about the Bluths out there. But when Lucille and Lindsay find out, they attack her and start another Bluth restaurant fight. Michael does really like Marta, though, and she soon realizes that she picked the wrong brother.
I made a huge mistake.
Job starts to suspect that she's cheating on him with a man's name he overheard.
This guy's name, like Hermano.
So Michael starts investigating and does think Marta's cheating on him, which is very uncool. So he calls her out for betraying Job, only to later realize that Hermano means brother.
I've made a huge mistake.
He has no problem with her cheating on Job with him, but their other Hermano, Buster, is outside too. He met her once and instantly fell in love. So on the day of their dad's hearing, Job finds out Michael's stealing Marta, and they have a brother fight outside the courthouse. It won't be the last time. And unfortunately, Marta realizes they are children and bails on all of them. One day, Tobias lets slip that Maeby may not be their natural-born daughter. Lucille implies that she was a test tube baby, and George Michael starts thinking that she's maybe not his cousin. But for now, George Michael has a new crush on his hot teacher. Unfortunately, at parent-teacher night, she and Michael hit it off, and they end up sleeping together. Michael does the responsible thing and blames it on Job. Job is still mad at Michael for the Marta thing, so gets revenge by setting him up on ugly double dates. But he mistakes Michael's general human compassion for sexual interest, so Job sleeps with her to get revenge. And Michael breaks the bad news. He wasn't interested in her. He's sleeping with a hot teacher. At the school dance, Michael finally admits to his son that he's dating his teacher, and Job realizes he slept with the wrong one again. But the teacher's not getting involved in this and bails on all of them. One day, Buster has a fight with his mom and moves out, only to find himself replaced by an adopted Vietnamese boy.
An Yang is your brother now.
An Yang.
Yes, Anyang.
Over the series, Buster and Ong-Yong have some nice sibling rivalry. George Sr. has embraced his newfound Judaism and is profiting from it with a series of self-help tapes, Caged Wisdom. He's visited by a huge fan of his, but turns out she's undercover with the FBI to get evidence on him. Unfortunately, though, all she gets is some nipple tweaking. Now, the company is low on funds, so they have to delay payroll a week, and that's how Michael finds out his whole family has been collecting paychecks. So Michael makes them work for their money, and Job challenges Buster to a game of chicken.
That is not how chicken sounds.
The chicken dance is hilarious, but the game itself is underwhelming. Eventually, the DA offers their father a plea deal, but it was way too long. Barry didn't read it. Michael fancies himself a bit of a lawyer because he was in a school play once.
You're a crook, Captain Hook.
He goes to a lawyer bar to read it and meets hot lawyer Maggie Lizer. They hit it off and have an incredible night together, but turns out she's blind. Michael missed all the subtle hints last night.
I'm blind.
I'm wasted.
Job also met a girl last night, and after an escalating series of dares, they ended up getting married. But with all the excitement, he never actually consummated it.
I had sex last night.
But he really didn't.
Yes, I did.
And turns out the prosecutor in his dad's case is Maggie Lizer. They send Tobias to sneak into her house and find out what evidence the DA actually has on him. But this proves more difficult than expected because she's not actually blind. She does end up, though, temporarily blinded, so when Michael throws the book at her, oh, it hits her. She and Michael come clean and decide they should probably stop dating, except this one last time. Now it's spring break in Newport Beach. The video series Girls with Low Self-Esteem is there, and Kitty's excited to join in this time with a new set of breast implants she's happy to show off. Michael wants to fire her, but his dad reminds him she's privy to a lot of sensitive information over the years. Last year, on a spring break special, Job declared he would make his yacht disappear, so this year he has to make good on his promise. And he actually does it. How'd he pull that off? Well, he sunk the yacht. It was part of his father's plan. That's where a lot of evidence was. Job's wife is actually a huge fan of Tobias. They had a family folk band where they were pushing pharmaceuticals. They get the band back together because it was fun times. Of course, it was only fun times because they were on drugs. George Michael, by the way, is an incredible woodblock player, but they don't want him in the band. Job's wife falls in love with Tobias and decides the right thing for her to do is to leave and join the army. Lindsay's been coming home with some new clothes lately, and she claims she's been shoplifting rather than admit she got a job in a shop. This angers Job, who thinks that he's the sleight of hand master in the family, but he's not that great either. Now, a big chunk of company money is finally unfrozen, and everyone wants a piece of it, including what looks like George Sr. with hair. It's his identical twin brother, Oscar. Oscar's a deadbeat hippie type, but he does own a great piece of land. Michael buys it with the unfrozen funds, only to find out it's worthless because the army does ballistics testing there. But Michael's mother saves the day. Oscar has always loved her, and she convinces him to sell the land back in exchange for rekindling their romance. Now, Newport has a take your daughter to work day, and Michael always used to bring George Michael as a joke, but it got less funny as he got older. So he decides to take his niece maybe, and they make an agreement, no lies all day. Unfortunately, the cops come, turns out Kitty is missing, and Michael was the last person very publicly seen with her. The new Girls with Low Self-Esteem video is out, and though Job's magic show was a flop, it does show Kitty sneaking onto the yacht to steal the evidence, but that means they might have blown her up. Luckily, Maby's instinct to lie kicks in, and she finds out the cops have Kitty, she survived, so they tell the truth and they're off the hook. Now, Kitty has the evidence and wants to blackmail the Bluth company. Michael's like, by the way, what is this evidence? And turns out it's just some missed taxes. Michael's like, oh, I'll pay that off, no problem. But just then, Michael sees a news story about American-built houses in Iraq, and that reminds Michael of something his dad once said.
There's a good chance I may have committed some light treason.
So George Sr. takes a polygraph, but has a heart attack during it, and they get some bad news from the doctor.
We lost him.
What he should have said, though, is that George escaped. So Michael's had it with his family. He's ready to take his son and start a new life in Phoenix. But they're gonna make Job president of the Bluth company, and Michael comes back. He can't let that happen. With George Sr. on the loose, his identical twin Oscar is often mistaken for him. And with her husband gone, Lucille has rekindled her love affair with his twin brother, which is awkward for Buster, who turns out it's heavily implied is Oscar's natural-born son.
They said my father was here.
Did they?
Tobias continues to be unknowingly very obviously gay. Lindsay is unhappy in the relationship and they agree to try an open marriage. Within seconds, she's met a hot realtor who she thinks is hitting on her.
I have an open thing going on too.
Of course, he just meant an open house. Her quick success, though, makes Tobias sad, so he joins what he thinks is a group for sad men. Of course, is the famous theater show, the Blue Man Group. He doesn't get in, of course. He just gets into paint every night in case they need him as a backup.
No, I'm afraid I just blew myself.
The family hires famed PI Gene Parmesan to track down their father. Looks like he's escaped to Mexico, and Buster wants to escape to Mexico too. Lucille was recently ambushed by a Michael Moore type and signed Buster up for the army. So Buster hides in the trunk and gets out at what he thinks is Mexico, but is really just his mom's housekeeper's house. In real Mexico, Michael's tackled by bounty hunter Ice that Job hired to keep an eye on him. Michael retasks him with finding their father. George Michael, by the way, has a girlfriend now, Anne.
Her?
But she is so bland and forgettable, Michael leaves her in Mexico. They soon get word from Ice, who is also a party planner, that George Sr. is dead. The Mexican police picked him up, and he's famous there because the cornballer is still sold in Mexico, where they redubbed the commercial to hide the fact that it causes horrible burns. Allegedly, they killed him in prison, but really he bribed his way out and came home hiding in the backyard. He found out that his wife was having an affair with his twin brother and came home to win her back. But only George Michael knows this, so they have a funeral where Job performs an illusion, which per usual goes poorly. George Michael tries to come clean to his father.
I have Pop-Up in the attic.
The mere fact that you call making love pop-up tells me you're not ready.
But Michael eventually realizes the truth, and they stage a fake escape, and George Sr. hides in the attic for the season. Now Job is still the acting president, and he's been wearing some of his dad's old suits to fit the part.
Worst that can happen is I can spill some on my $3,000 suit. Come on!
They have an office Christmas party to raise morale, where Michael and Maybe do a karaoke duet of Afternoon Delight. This was before Anchorman, so they don't realize it's about sex. Lindsay, in her open marriage, is trying her best to get laid. She meets a hot casual movie star type who turns out is homeless, but turns out he's actually a movie star pretending to be homeless. Now meet the Bluth's biggest competitor, Stan Sitwell. He has a condition where his body is totally hairless, so that's all fake. But he offers Job a job with Sitwell. George Sr. suspects it's only to get Job on their team for the annual softball game, and indeed Sitwell wants to play catch with him, and since Job's real father only played catch with him the once, Job is overcome with fatherly emotion and tries to win the game for him. Luckily, Anne is the brick wall. Tobias has a big audition coming up, so he and Maybe sneak into the studio and talk up the Funke name around the water cooler. Unfortunately, he introduces himself as Tobias, so that's a waste. Maybe, though, lies her way into getting a book report written for her, and when an exec sees it, you're the Funke everyone's talking about.
What are you, like 15?
Marry me.
So she accidentally becomes a studio executive. Now the Bluth stock is finally unfrozen, and they can sell off a little to make money as long as they don't all sell at once. Michael is sick of driving the stair car, so he thinks he deserves a modest new ride. Unfortunately, everyone also immediately sold their stocks, and they've lost control of the company to Lucille too. Buster, meanwhile, is trying to date younger women, and Tobias offers to be his wingman.
Even if it means me taking a chubby, I will suck it up.
Tobias spent his money to buy his dream nightclub. Lindsay wants that money back, though, to join a country club, so sends the hot cops to pose as thugs and scare him off. Fortunately, he reaches these ruffians with the power of dance. They decide to take their act to the streets, but have a much worse reception. Lucille, too, agrees to sell majority control back to the Bluths, but Job doesn't know this yet.
So Job Lucille too.
Later, Michael runs into an old crush, Sally Sitwell. The rivalry between their fathers always made things weird for them. Michael plans to bid on her at the annual date auction, but when he gets her father's approval, turns out she only liked him because her father didn't approve, and she bails. Per usual, the company needs more money, so they go to their Uncle Jack, who was an old radio star, the Bullet. He's very old now, has to be carried by Dragon. He agrees to help the company if he can go on a date with Lindsay. Remember, he's not their actual uncle. Michael has a romantic date package that came with the auction, and he's too chicken to ask Sally Sitwell.
That's not true at all.
Chicha.
So he convinces Lindsay to go with Uncle Jack, thinking she's going with Dragon. For complicated reasons, Michael also goes with Tobias, and Lucille too's going with Stan Sitwell, which makes the other Bluth brothers jealous. They bust in to reclaim their woman, and long story short, it's shenanigans. It's been about 8 months since Michael last saw Maggie Lizer, who turns out is about 8 months pregnant. He sends Tobias and Lindsay to investigate, and looks like she's faking the pregnancy. He tells her off, but turns out she's not faking. He investigates more and finds out the baby's not his. She's being a surrogate for a gay cop couple. But turns out she's not actually pregnant. She's working a case for a client suing a restaurant that made her fat, and she's the pregnant one, so it's believable. Michael and Maggie agree they shouldn't see each other anymore, except for this one last time. Now Buster has actually joined the army, and he's going to be shipped off soon, but first decides to face his biggest fear, the ocean. Now Job's wife was a seal seller and one day one of her seals got a taste for flesh. Job released it into the sea, and so Buster finds
Lucille! Watch out for Lucille!
That's funny because it's his mom's name, but he does lose a hand and gets a hook.
I'm a monster!
Job's wife is finally divorcing him, and he can save his money and get the marriage annulled if he admits he's never consummated it, which he's finally willing to do. But when he meets with her, she seduces him, and now there's proof the marriage was consummated. It's time for the annual Mother Boy pageant, which Lucille and Buster always go to, but with Buster now a monster, Lucille forces George Michael into it. Buster uses his army training to save George Michael.
Maybe Operation Hot Mother.
And the operation is a moderate success. Now George Michael's running for school president with the help of his girlfriend Anne, who wants to appeal to the Christian voters. Michael doesn't think that's a good idea, so he gets Job to run George Michael's campaign. So Anne leaves and makes a very nice heartfelt campaign video for Steve Holt, which makes George Michael's negative attack ad look pretty douchey, and accidentally makes public George Michael's most embarrassing moments. Now Job wants back into the Magician's Alliance, so he has a plan for Buster to pretend to be the magician while Job's the assistant. They have a big show. But per usual, Job botches it and cuts off Buster's fake hand, which luckily people think is the trick. This gets them the attention of famed magician Tony Wonder.
Somebody say, Wonder.
They perform again, and Job reveals himself as the true magician, but unfortunately the trick doesn't work as well in reverse. Michael finally meets Anne's super religious parents, and turns out her mom is really hot and is seduced by Michael's secular ways. George Michael accidentally proposes to Anne, and they run off to get married, only to find his grandparents renewing their vows. George Sr. got Job to kidnap his mother with the help of his puppet Franklin, more on him later, but Oscar busts in to fight for his lady love, and the identical twins have an identical fight, and when Michael reveals he kissed Anne's mom, there's more shenanigans. Now it's spring break again in Newport, and Girls Without Self-Esteem is back, this time led by Zach Braff. Lindsay wants to protest it, and Tobias wants to help by pantsing Zach Braff, only to discover he's a never nude as well. Around this time, Lindsay kicks Tobias out of the house, so he comes back doing a Mrs. Doubtfire, but confuses it with Mary Poppins. Tobias does land an acting gig doing a true crime series about the Bluths. In an ad-libbed line, though, he makes it very obvious George Sr.'s hiding in the attic. Kitty finds him first and kidnaps him with a cooler full of evidence, so Lucille's got to challenge her to a drinking competition, which she will win. Now Michael has to swear under oath he doesn't know where his father is, so he gets Job and Franklin to knock their father out and hide him somewhere. But on the way, Job realizes Michael never even opened the CD that he and Franklin made for him.
It ain't easy being white. It ain't easy being brown.
So when Michael signs, he's immediately under arrest because they've got proof he was with his father that morning, of course with just the CD case. Maybe has had huge success as a producer with a series inspired by her grandma, the horror series Gangi. Her studio's doing an American remake of the French film about cousin kissing that was George Michael's favorite. Anne wants to protest it, and last time they protested, George Michael got a kiss, so they go, but turns out the protesting just made the movie more popular and maybe gives George Michael a kiss. Just then the floor of the model home collapses, and the cousins find themselves really making out. Unfortunately, under the house is where Job hid George Sr., so he shows up at the courtroom empty-handed, and the brothers have a fight there again. Their father does show up, though, and decides for the good of the family he'll turn himself in. Of course, what he really does is shave his twin's head and send Oscar to prison. With George Sr. in prison, things are looking up for the Bluth Company. Michael goes to brag to his father, only to discover it's his uncle.
I'm Oscar.com.
Job gets a letter from an organization that reunites fathers and sons, thinking his dad's reaching out to him. Steve Holt's dad never shows either, though, so they decide to have some son and son bonding time. Of course, it's very obvious that Steve Holt is Job's son. Things have been awkward between the cousins since their kiss, so they agree to meet back in the stair car in the morning to kiss again, so it's not awkward. George Michael slept there so as not to miss it, but when Michael sees this, he thinks his son wanted some father-son bonding time. Maybe feeling ditched by her cousin, decides she may as well kiss Steve Holt, who is also unknowingly her cousin. Michael and his son go to the family cabin for some father-son time, but in the morning he finds his own father. He's eventually brought in and put under house arrest, where his new warden is very strict. George Sr. claims that he was a patsy. He was set up by the Brits. Michael goes to Wee Britain to investigate these claims and finds the files to be out of his reach.
Therefore, British eyes only.
For British eyes only.
He meets a beautiful British girl named Rita and enlists her help, but he finds himself threatened by some scary Brits. Maybe his father was telling the truth. Job is planning his latest illusion, and Tobias, eager for any acting gig, offers to be his body double. He preemptively gets hair plants to prove his commitment. Long story short, on the day of the illusion, It gets botched, and George Sr. has another failed escape attempt. Now the Bluths finally fire Barry and get a real attorney.
You need blah, blah, blah.
Lindsay is still unhappy in her marriage to Tobias because he does things like this.
An analyst and a therapist. The world's first analrapist.
She tries to seduce blah blah blah, but accidentally hires him as an attorney instead. Later, there's a church and state fair where Maeby tries to sabotage the beauty pageant, but ends up winning. Anne entered too and comes in second place, and now that she's a big shot second place winner, she's too good for George Michael and dumps him. George Sr. says Michael's been too scared to date since his wife died and calls him a chicken.
Cuckoo-ca-cha! Cuckoo-ca-cha!
So pretty soon the whole family joins in, and it's this glorious scene.
I haven't found the right girl. When I do, I will ask her out. Has anyone in this family ever even seen a chicken?
Michael's love life is great, though, with the hot British girl Rita. She's an amazing, eccentric indie dream girl, and pretty soon Michael's fallen for her. But she's working with the scary British guy. And indeed, soon the Bluth Company finds out it has a mole.
My sources tell me that the leak goes by the name Mr. F.
Michael realizes Mr. F is Rita, he's just being used, and he dumps her. Meanwhile, George Sr. under house arrest has been using a surrogate to get around. There's a misunderstanding where Buster's controlling the surrogate and builds a train set with his brother Job. They use it to trick the Japanese investors into thinking they've actually finished construction. But meanwhile, Tobias has a new gym buddy. When he tells him he's an agent with the FBI, Tobias thinks that's a talent agency. And when he says he wants him to be a mole, Tobias thinks he means this. And Michael realizes that the real Mr. F is Tobias Funke. Michael rushes to apologize to Rita, but now she's being deported, so he offers to marry her so she can stay in the country. They're excited to consummate their engagement, but George Michael's been spending some time with her and has noticed some strange behavior. What did her Mr. F bracelet mean?
Mentally retarded female.
That's right, Michael missed all the signs because her charming accent kind of covered it up.
I've made a huge mistake.
The scary British guy is no spy, he's just her uncle, and he wants to stop the wedding because he thinks Michael's taking advantage of her because she's rich. With this information, the Bluth family is fully supportive, but Michael has to do the right thing and break up with her. The Bluth family holds their annual charity fundraiser to fight TBA, which is not a disease, it just means to be announced. But this year they have a great disease to fight, graft versus host. Tobias's hair plugs have rejected his body and have been making him progressively more sick. So the gala goes well until the guests realize Tobias can be cured if he just takes out his hair plants. George Sr. is trying to run the company from house arrest through Job. He pits his sons against each other with competing banana stands, which eventually they realize is just a cover for this illegal Colombian deal he wants to do. The boys want to teach their dad a lesson by making it seem like he's kidnapped by Colombians, but their dad grabs a gun and shoots this guy's arm clean off. Yes, that's why you don't teach your father lessons. It was Job who told their plans, so the brothers are fighting again just like they did as kids. But this time Job throws Michael off the balcony. What? Aha, that was a lesson. Don't pit your sons against each other. But all the commotion makes the real cops come and they shoot Buster's hand clean off. That's his lesson. Don't use amputees to teach lessons. Near the end of season 3, Arrested Development found out they were canceled, so they start having funny meta jokes.
I don't think the Home Builders Organization is going to be supporting us.
Yeah, the HBO's not going to want us.
Michael wants them all to get jobs, and Job pretends to be a waiter as a joke. Unfortunately, his mom has never looked at a waiter in her life, so trying to keep the joke going, he accidentally gets a job as a waiter. They're going to hold a fundraiser to save the family, but Lindsay is in charge of the food.
Guess what I'm calling it?
Soup?
Hot ham water.
So that's a failure. The prosecution finds an illegal account under N. Bluth. Michael finds the secret room in the model home, which everyone else knew about and used for personal things. Michael discovers he has a secret sister named Nellie. He looks her up in his father's old files. Turns out she's working as a consultant now, and they really hit it off. Not because they're siblings, but because she's a prostitute. Her pimp is actually Job/Franklin. The girl in the photo was nothing. The Bluth case is finally going to trial, and the whole family has to testify. Buster fakes a coma to get out of it, which makes his nurse fall in love with him until she finds out he's faking. And Job flees to Iraq to do a magic show, only to accidentally start an anti-American protest. The brothers go to get him out of jail, but turns out their father sent him there to burn down the evidence of the treasonous houses. And who should be living in the Iraqi model home but Saddam Hussein's lookalikes? It's a house of Saddam lookalikes. But in the secret room in this house, it's a nuclear bomb. The CIA comes and they're all under arrest. But that's a fake bomb. It's actually a CIA listening device. surprise? Turns out it was the CIA who hired George Bluth through a British building company to build houses in Iraq so that they could surveil them. This means their father is innocent of light treason, definitely still guilty of embezzling though, but they get them to drop all the charges. So the Bluth family is celebrating. Things are looking up for them. With all the excitement though, the family forgets about Maby's birthday, so George Michael wants to throw her a surprise party, invites all of her contact book, which is mostly Hollywood big shots, and outs her secret. The cousins drink some fake wine, and George Michael reveals the big mystery that maybe they're not really cousins. So with this news, the cousins hook up again, only to discover in the morning that she is definitely Lindsay's natural-born daughter. But Lindsay gets some big news. She's not really a Bluth, she was adopted. Meanwhile, George Michael finds his Uncle Job with his ex-girlfriend Anne. Her? Turns out Job was a judge in the beauty pageant and always goes after second place because they have low self-esteem, so George Michael punches his uncle. But amidst all this chaos, the company is saved and Michael's really gonna be president. But the cops come again. This time they're after Lucille Bluth. Turns out Anyang is back. Anyang? He disappeared halfway through the series because he's been collecting surveillance on them to get revenge for his grandfather's banana stand. Lucille's not going quietly though. She hijacks the ship and takes it out to sea. So Michael decides it's time to let his family keep themselves together for a change, and that's how Arrested Development comes to an end.